Today, we're taking a long, slow drive down memory lane. We aren't just looking at old cars. We're celebrating 15 automotive icons that have long since vanished from the showroom floor, but have never truly left our hearts. These are the brands that defined an era of American industrial pride, before algorithms designed every curve and every car started looking the same. But stay tuned, because one brand on our list today didn't start with internal combustion at all. It actually built the rugged horse-drawn wagons that carried soldiers through the battlefields of the Civil War, long before it ever touched a steering wheel. 1. AMC, American Motors Corporation, the bold underdog. We begin with the ultimate underdog, AMC. Formed in 1954 from the merger of Nash and Hudson, American Motors was the company that dared to be different. While the Big Three in Detroit were focused on making cars longer, lower, and wider, AMC was the king of the quirky and the compact. Do you remember the first time you saw a Pacer? With its massive glass area, it was affectionately called the Flying Fishbowl. It was weird, it was wonderful, and it was impossible to miss in the church parking lot. And who could forget the Gremlin? Specifically, that Levi's edition where the seats were actually made of denim, complete with those little copper rivets that would get scorching hot in the summer sun. But AMC wasn't just about quirks, they were visionaries. They gave us the AMC Eagle in 1980, the world's first true crossover. It had the comfort of a station wagon and the four-wheel drive capability of a truck. Decades before the SUV took over the world, AMC saw the future coming. They were the little company that could, reminding us that you didn't need to be the biggest to be the boldest. 2. Checker, Kalamazoo's Marathon Man. If there was one car that defined the American city, it was the Checker. Based in Kalamazoo, Michigan, Checker didn't care about annual styling changes or tail fins. They cared about one thing: durability. The Checker Marathon remained essentially unchanged for decades. Do you remember the sheer, cavernous legroom in a Checker? You could practically hold a dance in the back seat. There was no hump in the floor, just a flat expanse of heavy-duty linoleum or carpet. It was the big yellow cab that felt like a tank, built to survive millions of miles of potholes and city traffic. For many Americans, a ride in a Checker was their first experience of luxury, not because of fancy leather, but because of the incredible space and the feeling that this car was absolutely indestructible. It was a utilitarian masterpiece that refused to go out of style, simply because it was too busy working. 3. DeLorean, the stainless steel dream. In the early 1980s, the automotive world was stunned by a man named John DeLorean. He wanted to build an ethical sports car, something that wouldn't rust and wouldn't go out of style. The result was the DMC-12. With its brushed stainless steel skin and those magnificent gull-wing doors, it looked like it had dropped straight out of a science fiction movie. I think we all remember the first time we saw those doors lift toward the sky. It didn't matter that the engine wasn't particularly fast or that fingerprints were a nightmare to clean off that steel. It represented a dream. It was the product of a rebel who walked away from the top floor of GM to do things his own way. Though the company ended in scandal and only about 9,000 cars were made, the DeLorean remains a symbol of 80s ambition. It was the car that proved that even if a dream ends, the icon can live forever. 4. DeSoto, the Chrysler Conquistador. Named after the Spanish explorer Hernando de Soto, this brand was Walter Chrysler's answer to the mid-priced market. For over 30 years, DeSoto stood for style and solid engineering. If you grew up in the 50s, you surely remember those iconic tooth grills, rows of vertical chrome bars that made the car look like it was grinning at the world. And then there was the Fire Dome V8. It was Chrysler's way of giving you the thrill of a Hemi-style engine without the flagship price tag. DeSoto was often the car of the suburban professional, the doctor, the architect, the family that had made it. It was a brand that carried a certain dignity. When DeSoto vanished in 1961, it felt like a quiet end to a very loud era of chrome. It's a brand we miss because it represented a perfect middle ground, more exciting than a Plymouth, but more approachable than a Chrysler. 5. Edsel, the hype and the heritage. The Edsel is often remembered as one of history's greatest business blunders, but for those of us who were there, it was something much more interesting. Launched by Ford in 1957 and named after Henry Ford's son, the Edsel was backed by a $400 million hype campaign. It was supposed to be the car of the future. Do you remember the teletouch shifting? The gear buttons were located right in the center of the steering wheel hub. It felt like something out of a NASA control room. And of course, there was that famous vertical grille. Some people loved it. Many people, well, they had other names for it. But despite the jokes, the Edsel was a beautifully appointed car with features that were years ahead of their time. Today, seeing an Edsel at a car show is a treat. It's a reminder that even when the world isn't ready for a design, the passion behind it can still be felt decades later. 6. Hudson, the step-down vanguard. Long before a certain blue car appeared in a Pixar movie, the fabulous Hudson Hornet was a real-world legend. In 1948, Hudson revolutionized the industry with their step-down chassis. Instead of sitting on the frame, passengers sat inside it. This gave the Hudson a low center of gravity that made it handle like a dirt tracks of early NASCAR. Remember the sight of those Hudsons dominating the track? They proved that a comfortable, spacious family sedan could also be a world-class racer. On the inside, the dashboards were works of art, with shimmering chrome and glowing dials. Hudson was a pioneer in safety and performance, and for a few glorious years in the early 50s, they were the kings of the road. When they merged with Nash to form AMC, a bit of that pure Hudson magic was lost, but the legacy of the Hornet still stings with nostalgia. 7. Imperial, the sovereign marque. There was luxury, and then there was Imperial. For a time, Chrysler decided that Imperial should be its own standalone brand to compete directly with Cadillac and Lincoln. And boy, did they go big. Do you remember the sheer length of an Imperial from the early 60s? It felt like you needed a harbor pilot just to park the thing. But once you were on the open road, nothing felt more solid. It was a living room on wheels, featuring some of the first all-transistor car radios and push-button transmissions that worked with a satisfying mechanical click. Engagement trigger number 1. Think back to the longest road trip you ever took in one of these massive American cruisers. How many states did you cross in that rolling palace? Tell us your favorite road trip memory and the year of the car in the comments below. 8. Mercury, the stylish step-up. Created in 1938 by Edsel Ford, Mercury was designed to bridge the gap between the everyday Ford and the opulent Lincoln. It was the cool cousin of the Ford family. We all remember the 1949 Mercury, the ultimate lead sled that became the star of Rebel Without a Cause. But for many of us, the Mercury memory that sticks most is the breezeway window. Remember that? A rear glass pane that rolled down vertically, allowing for a draft-free breeze even at highway speeds. It was the height of 1960s cool. Later, in the 80s, Mercury gave us the Sable, which looked like a spaceship compared to everything else on the road with its futuristic light bar. Mercury was always about that little bit of extra flair, that touch of class that made you feel like you were moving up in the world. It was a brand for people who appreciated the finer details without needing to shout about them. 9. Oldsmobile, the innovation engine. Oldsmobile was the oldest brand in the GM stable, founded in 1897, but it was always the most forward-thinking. They gave us the first fully automatic transmission, the Hydra-Matic, and of course, the legendary Rocket V8. If you were a teenager in the late 40s or early 50s, the Rocket 88 was the car of your dreams. It was essentially the world's first muscle car. But beyond the speed, Olds was about comfort. Do you remember the plush, heavy bench seats of your father's or grandfather's Delta 88 or 98? It felt like sitting on a velvet sofa while gliding over the pavement. For decades, the Cutlass was the most popular car in the country because it hit that perfect sweet spot of style and reliability. When Oldsmobile was shuttered in 2004, it felt like losing a piece of our collective DNA. It was a brand that stayed with families for generations. 10. Packard, the zenith of opulence. Long before the term luxury was overused, there was Packard. One of the 3 P's of prestige, alongside Peerless and Pierce Arrow, Packard was the undisputed pinnacle of American success. Their slogan was simple and legendary: "Ask the man who owns one." It was a brand that didn't need to boast. The quality spoke for itself. They introduced air conditioning to the masses and built V12 engines that ran so smoothly you could balance a nickel on the block while it was idling. For those who remember the pre-war and early post-war era, a Packard was a symbol that you had truly arrived. It was the choice of presidents and Hollywood royalty. Though the brand struggled in the 50s and eventually merged with Studebaker, the name Packard still carries a weight of dignity and craftsmanship that we rarely see in the modern world. 11. Plymouth, affordability and adrenaline. Plymouth started in 1928 as Chrysler's entry-level brand, meant to compete with Ford and Chevy. But by the 1960s, it had become a muscle car giant. Who could forget the Roadrunner? It was a car that didn't take itself too seriously, complete with a meep-meep horn and a cartoon mascot. But it could leave almost anything in the dust at a stoplight. And then there was the Barracuda, a car so beautiful and powerful it still turns heads at every stoplight today. Engagement trigger number 2. Which Plymouth muscle car was your absolute dream ride? Was it the Cuda, the Roadrunner, or maybe a classic Fury like Christine? Tell us the color and the engine size you always wanted in the comments. Plymouth wasn't just about speed, though. They practically invented the modern family era with the Voyager minivan in 1984. It was a brand that understood what the American family needed, whether it was a trip to the grocery store or a quarter-mile sprint. 12. Pontiac, the performance laboratory. If Oldsmobile was the teacher and Buick was the manager, Pontiac was the athlete. Known as GM's excitement division, Pontiac gave us some of the most visceral memories of the 20th century. It all started with the wide-track design, which gave the cars a planted, aggressive stance. And then came 1964, the year the GTO was born, sparking the entire muscle car revolution. But perhaps the most iconic image is that of the Firebird Trans Am. Remember the screaming chicken on the hood? After Smokey and the Bandit hit theaters, every teenager in America wanted to be Burt Reynolds, shifting gears and outrunning the law in a black and gold Pontiac. It was a brand that stood for rebellion, performance, and pure, unadulterated fun. When Pontiac took its final bow in 2010, the road got a little bit quieter and a lot less exciting. 13. Saturn, a different kind of car company. In 1985, General Motors decided to try something radical. They created Saturn, a different kind of car company. Based in Spring Hill, Tennessee, Saturn wasn't just about the cars. It was about the experience. Do you remember the no-haggle pricing? It took the stress out of the dealership. And who could forget those dent-resistant polymer panels? You could kick the door of a Saturn and it would just pop right back out. But what really made Saturn special was the community. Thousands of owners used to drive their cars to the factory in Tennessee for the Saturn homecoming just to celebrate being part of the brand. It was a rare moment where a car company felt like a family. While the brand eventually moved away from its unique roots and closed in 2010, the spirit of that early Saturn revolution is something many of us still remember fondly. 14. Studebaker, the wagon maker's legacy. Earlier, I mentioned a company that started with Civil War wagons. That company was Studebaker. Founded in 1852, they are the only manufacturer to successfully transition from horse-drawn vehicles to gasoline engines. Studebaker was always the design leader. Do you remember the bullet nose models of the early 50s? They looked like they were ready to take flight even when they were parked at the curb. They gave us the Starlight Coupe with its wraparound rear window and later the Avanti, a car so futuristic it still looks modern today. Studebaker was the pride of South Bend, Indiana, and their cars were built with a unique, independent spirit. Engagement trigger number 3. Studebaker had some of the most daring designs in history. Did anyone in your family own one of these bullet-nose beauties, or perhaps a Lark? We'd love to hear your stories of Indiana's finest. 15. Willys-Overland, the spirit of the MB. Finally, we come to Willys-Overland. While the name might not be as common as Chevrolet today, its legacy is everywhere. Willys was the company that won the government contract to build the original Jeep MB for World War II. After the war, they took that can-do military spirit and brought it to the American suburbs. Do you remember the Willys Jeep station wagons? They were all steel, rugged, and were essentially the ancestors of every SUV we see on the road today. They also produced the Aero, a surprisingly sleek and efficient compact car. Though the Willys name was eventually absorbed into Kaiser and then Jeep, its DNA lives on in every four-wheel drive vehicle that tackles a mountain trail. It was a brand born of necessity and hardened by war, which became a beloved part of the American post-war landscape. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to join our community of history lovers. And please, share this video with your family. Perhaps it'll spark a story from your dad or grandpa about their first Rocket or Hornet that you've never heard before. Thank you for spending this time with us today and for keeping the spirit of the American road alive.